The sound of a basketball bouncing against the pavement had been part of the neighborhood for years. Every evening, kids gathered in driveways, taking shots while their parents chatted on the sidewalk. The occasional swish of the net, the squeak of sneakers on pavement, and the laughter of friends. It was the sound of a real community. At least, it was until the HOA decided to ruin everything. Mike had lived in Willow Creek Estates for 5 years, and while he didn't love the idea of an HOA, he'd mostly kept out of their way. Sure, they sent out the occasional, "Your grass is 1 inch too tall" violation letter, but he always handled it with a sigh and a quick mow. But this time, they'd crossed the line. It started when his neighbor, Ben, got a notice taped to his front door. Mike was outside, teaching his 10-year-old son, Jordan, how to perfect his free throw when he saw Ben rip the paper off the door and stare at it, his face turning redder by the second. "Everything okay, man?" Mike called over. Ben let out a bitter laugh and walked over, waving the paper. "Read this garbage." Mike took the notice and scanned the words. His eyes narrowed. "Attention! HOA rule update. Effective immediately, all basketball hoops, permanent or portable, are prohibited in driveways and visible areas within the Willow Creek Estates community. Violators will be fined $100 per week until the hoop is removed." Mike felt his blood pressure spike. "Are they serious?" Ben scoffed. "Dead serious." The HOA president, Karen Langston, said they're an eyesore and ruin the neighborhood aesthetic. Mike clenched his jaw. "They're banning basketball hoops, but not those ugly-ass lawn gnomes Mrs. Peterson has all over her yard?" Ben shook his head. "Exactly. It's total nonsense." Mike looked back at his own driveway. Jordan stood there, basketball in hand, staring at his hoop, the same hoop he'd spent hours shooting on, practicing for his school's basketball team. "No way," Mike muttered. "I'm not taking it down." Ben sighed. "Me neither, but I hear they're already sending fines." "They're serious about this, Mike." Mike took a deep breath. If the HOA wanted a fight, they were about to get one. 2 days later, the first fine arrived. Mike found an envelope in his mailbox, stamped with the official Willow Creek Estates HOA seal. He opened it and read the ridiculous charge. Notice of violation. Homeowner, Mike Reynolds. Violation. Unauthorized basketball hoop display. Fine, $100. Compliance deadline, 7 days. Mike chuckled. Yeah, that's not happening. Instead of removing the hoop, he printed the fine and taped it to the pole. That night, he heard the sound of a car idling outside his driveway. He peeked through his window and saw a white SUV parked on the street, one he recognized as belonging to Karen Langston, the HOA president herself. She sat in the driver's seat, scowling at his basketball hoop like it personally offended her. Mike smirked. Good. Let her be mad. The next morning, another fine arrived. Then another, and another. Mike ignored every single one. By the end of the week, he owed the HOA $500, and Karen had started sending out threatening emails. That's when Mike decided it was time to change the game. Sitting at his kitchen table, Mike stared at a blueprint he had just sketched out on a napkin. A full-size basketball court. Not just a driveway hoop. Not just a half court. A full regulation-size court in his backyard, with professional flooring, floodlights, and even a scoreboard. Dad, Jordan said, peering over his shoulder, is this real? Mike grinned. Oh, it's real. His wife, Emily, walked in and crossed her arms. You're really doing this? Mike leaned back. They want to ban a simple basketball hoop? Fine. Let's go bigger. Emily shook her head but smirked. You're insane. I prefer determined. By the end of the week, he had hired a construction crew to level his backyard, ordered professional-grade flooring, purchased floodlights so games could go on at night, invited the entire neighborhood to come over once it was done. The HOA lost their minds. Karen stormed up to his porch, flanked by 2 other HOA board members, their faces red with rage. What the hell do you think you're doing? She hissed. Mike leaned against his doorway, arms crossed, building a basketball court. On my property, where your rules don't apply. Karen's face twisted. That's absurd. It's a disturbance. It's... Mike smirked. It's legal. Karen pointed a finger at him. We'll see about that. Mike knew she was going to try everything to shut him down, but he was ready. Karen Langston was livid. The day after she saw my backyard basketball court under construction, she started firing off emails. First, she threatened me with new fines. Then, she claimed I needed special permits for excessive backyard modifications. I ignored every message. Then, she showed up at my house again, this time with the HOA's legal enforcer, some guy named Richard Steele, who looked like he ordered all his suits from a Sears clearance sale. You're violating multiple HOA policies, Richard said, flipping through a clipboard of nonsense. I raised an eyebrow. Show me where it says I can't build a basketball court. Richard coughed and muttered. Well, it falls under unauthorized recreational structures. Not in my backyard. It doesn't. I shot back. This is private property. Karen's eye twitched. We'll see about that. I grinned, looking forward to it. 2 weeks later, my backyard basketball court was finished. Regulation-size flooring, floodlights for night games, a professional scoreboard, seating for spectators. And the best part? The entire neighborhood was invited. I made flyers and handed them out to every house. Hoops night, basketball, first neighborhood game on Mike's new court. Free snacks and drinks. Bring your A game. By 7 p.m. that night, over 50 people had shown up. Families, teenagers, even some older folks who just wanted to watch the games. People were laughing, cheering, and playing pickup games under the lights. It was the most alive the neighborhood had ever felt. And then, Police Scarlight, the HOA showdown begins. Police Scarlight. Karen and Richard stormed in like they were raiding a crime scene. This event is illegal. Karen screeched. This is a violation of HOA rules. I smirked. Funny, I don't see that anywhere in the bylaws. Richard pulled out his clipboard again, flipping through papers. You're causing excessive noise. That's a violation. Oh, you mean like Karen's husband's leaf blower at 6 a.m.? I asked loudly. The crowd burst into laughter. Karen's face turned beet red. I'm issuing you a final warning, she spat. I crossed my arms. And I'm issuing you an invitation to watch the game. The crowd cheered. Karen and Richard stomped off, but I knew they weren't done yet. The fines weren't enough. The sabotage wasn't enough. Karen and her cronies were just getting started. I woke up one morning to a city tow truck parked in my driveway. What the hell? I muttered as I ran outside. A city worker in a neon vest looked at his clipboard. Got a report about an abandoned vehicle on the property. We're here to tow it. They were trying to take my car. Ben ran up, out of breath. Dude, Karen just sent out a notice. She reported your car as a junked vehicle to the city. I clenched my fists. This was low, even for her. You're not towing anything, I told the worker. This is my personal vehicle, and I have the registration to prove it. The city worker checked the papers, sighed, and canceled the tow. Karen had officially crossed the line. After Karen's failed towing stunt, I knew she was hiding something bigger. Ben, and I started digging into HOA financial records. And what we found was shocking. Karen had been funneling HOA funds into a private account, issuing fake fines to homeowners and pocketing the money, using HOA money to renovate her own backyard. But the real bombshell? She had already signed a deal to sell part of the neighborhood's common property, the community park, to a real estate developer. That's why she wanted my court gone. If she could eliminate all recreational areas, she could sell the land for millions. I printed out every piece of evidence and waited for the right moment. Karen wasn't done trying to ruin me. A week later, I got a knock on the door. 2 police officers stood outside. Sir, we received an anonymous tip that you've been running an illegal gambling operation in your backyard. I burst out laughing. Karen was trying to frame me for running a casino. Ben walked up, shaking his head. This is insane. I took the officers in my backyard, where, shockingly, there was a pile of poker chips and playing cards sitting near my court. Karen had planted fake evidence. One of the officers gave me a look. This seems sketchy. I nodded. It is, and I have security cameras. I pulled up the footage, and there she was, Karen, sneaking into my yard at 3 a.m., dumping poker chips on my court. The officers watched the video and sighed. Well, one said, "I think we have a different trespassing case to deal with." Karen was officially under police investigation. The next day, I woke up to the worst sight yet. My entire basketball court was destroyed, floodlights smashed, the backboard shattered, spray paint across the court reading, HOA wins. I stood there, fists clenched. This was war. I turned to Ben. "We're taking her down." With the financial fraud evidence, police report, and security footage, we called for an emergency HOA meeting. When Karen walked in, she looked confident, smug, until I stood up. "Karen," I said, "we know everything." I laid out every single crime she had committed: the secret bank account, the fake fines, the land sale. Then I played the security footage of her planting poker chips on my court. Karen's smug smile vanished. "No, and oh, this is a setup," she shrieked. Richard Steele, her own HOA lawyer, shook his head. "Karen, we're done." Ben stood up. "I moved to remove Karen Langston as HOA president and file a class action lawsuit against her." Over 90% of the room raised their hands. Karen was done. The lawsuit hit Karen hard. Then the IRS got involved after some of me tipped them off about her hidden HOA bank account. The final blow? She was arrested for embezzlement. The entire neighborhood cheered as the cops took her away. With Karen gone, the HOA was under new leadership. Ben was elected HOA president and immediately passed a rule: all basketball hoops and recreational courts are fully legal in Willow Creek. Then the neighborhood came together to rebuild my court, bigger and better. I even got a massive donation from a local sports store who loved the story and wanted to help. Months later, just when we thought it was over, Karen came back. She had somehow gotten out of her legal troubles and moved into a nearby neighborhood. One night, she showed up to a basketball game on my court. She stood at the fence, watching. I walked over. "Need something, Karen?" She looked furious, bitter. "You think you won," she muttered, "but I'll be back." I smirked. "No, Karen, you're done." Karen might have been gone, but some of her old cronies weren't. One of them, a guy named Todd, tried to reinstate the basketball ban by sneaking in a new bylaw proposal. This time, I was ready. I hired a lawyer, gathered the entire neighborhood, and had 50 people show up to the next meeting. When Todd tried to push the rule through, I stood up and said, "If you pass this, we're voting to dissolve the HOA." That scared them badly. The vote? 100% against Todd. And just like that, the HOA officially gave up. With the HOA defeated forever, we hosted the biggest game in neighborhood history. Over 100 people showed up. Kids, families, even old folks who just wanted to watch. I had custom jerseys made that said, "Karen's Court because we won." And as the sun set, I stood at half court, looking at my community, the people who stood up to corruption, the neighbors who became family. And I realized this wasn't just about a basketball hoop. This was about winning our neighborhood back. Game over, HOA. Just when I thought it was over, I got a foreclosure notice. Notice of property seizure. Due to unpaid HOA fines, the Homeowners Association has initiated proceedings to claim ownership of your property. My jaw dropped. The fines have been dropped months ago. I stormed into the HOA office, where Todd, the last of Karen's old allies, sat behind a desk, smirking. "You thought we'd let you get away with this," he sneered. Karen may have been gone, but her influence still lingered. But what Todd didn't know, I had recorded our entire conversation. I hired a lawyer and took the HOA to court. Todd's brilliant plan? To argue that because I had racked up overdue fines, the HOA had the right to claim my house. But my lawyer dropped the bombshell. The fines were never legally enforced. Todd had falsified signatures to push the foreclosure. And best of all, I had an audio recording of Todd admitting it was personal revenge. The judge took less than 5 minutes to decide. All foreclosure actions are reversed. The HOA has no claim to this property. Furthermore, Mr. Todd Simmons is personally liable for fraud. Todd turned pale. And just like that, he was finished. With Karen and Todd gone, I proposed a nuclear option, a vote to permanently dissolve the HOA. Ben and I rallied the entire neighborhood. It was a landslide. HOA officially abolished. No more fines. No more harassment. Freedom restored. The neighborhood erupted in celebration. And to commemorate the victory, I renamed my basketball court the People's Court in memory of the HOA's demise. Just when we thought it was over, Karen made a secret comeback. A few months after the HOA dissolved, rumors started spreading. New rules were appearing in mailboxes. Strange meetings were being held in Karen's old house. And worst of all, some people were actually listening to her again. Ben called me one night, furious. Karen is trying to start a shadow HOA. She's calling it a neighborhood committee, but it's the same thing. This woman would not quit. I crashed one of Karen's secret meetings. She was standing at a podium in her backyard, trying to convince people to restore order by signing on to her new voluntary HOA. I stood up. Karen, didn't you learn your lesson? No one wants you in charge. She smiled. Mike, I don't need everyone. I just need enough. Then I saw it, a petition. If she got enough signatures, she could legally reform the HOA. I looked around. Some people were hesitating. They weren't sure who to trust. So I made my move. Who here remembers when Karen tried to have my house foreclosed? Who remembers when she stole thousands from this neighborhood? I pulled out a stack of files, printed proof of Karen's corruption, her fake fines, and even emails showing she tried to sell our land. People gasped. One by one, they ripped up her petition. Karen's face turned red. You think this is over? She screamed. She stormed off into her house. Karen had lost. Again. That night, at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Ben. His voice was shaky. Mike, Karen's house is on fire. I jumped out of bed, ran outside, and sure enough, Karen's house was engulfed in flames. Fire trucks surrounded the place. The entire neighborhood stood outside, watching in shock. Then I noticed something strange. Karen was nowhere to be seen. She had vanished. Days later, rumors started spreading. Karen hadn't just disappeared. She had fled the country. Ben and I did some digging, and we found out Karen sold her house under a fake name. 3 days before the fire, she transferred her stolen HOA money to an offshore account, and she had bought a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands. She had planned everything. She knew her shadow HOA was failing, so she burned her own house down for insurance money and escaped before she could be arrested. The neighborhood was stunned. The police launched an arson investigation, but with Karen gone, the case stalled. Karen had gotten away with it. For now, even though Karen escaped, her reign of terror was over. The neighborhood was finally free. We kept the HOA from ever returning and turned my basketball court into a full community center. Ben even ran for local office, vowed to fight against HOA corruption. And me? I put up one final sign on my court. Karen's kingdom has fallen. The people won. Enjoy the game. Game over. HOA.